What if surviving meant saying nothing, moving less, and listening more deep in a living forest where every tree watches, every root remembers, and the night itself decides who stays and who vanishes? 16 elite cadets dropped into an alien jungle, but only one understood the truth. To survive Aurelius V, you must earn its silence. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and show your support with a quick thumbs up by liking the video. Now, let's jump into the story. The capsule sliced through pearl gray mist and settled into the sponge-soft floor of Aurelius V with a sigh of hot steam. Before the hull had cooled, Lyrae wind slipped through the hatch and stood still, listening. The air felt thick, almost liquid, sweet with the smell of sap and metal. Beneath her boots, the moss compressed, then rose again, as though the planet breathed under her weight. Somewhere above, unseen leaves rustled without wind, a warning whispered in a language she did not. Yet no dot around the clearing, other drop pods fell like iron seeds. Some braked with gentle blue thrusters, others crashed through limbs, snapping branches that folded back into place as if alive. Each of the 16 cadets came from a different world and carried proud devices: reactive armor, optic implants, bonded drones. Lyrae carried only a belt of cord, a chipped knife, and the memory of forests back on Earth where she had camped with her grandmother. The academy staff had called her Kit Quaint. She preferred the word quiet. She knelt and pressed a bare palm into the soil. It pulsed once, like a slow heartbeat greeting her skin. She pulled back before it learned too much about her scent, then rose and moved without hurry. The trees were wrong to her eyes, bending in gentle spirals instead of reaching straight. Bark plates glistened like wet stone and opened here and there to reveal pale, drinking pores. Each trunk seemed to watch her from many eyelids of wood. Higher, woven branches formed dim corridors in which silver pollen drifted like lazy snow. A sharp crack rang across a small ravine. Nurai, an insectoid cadet, had deployed bright silk domes meant to hover on vibrating air pockets. The domes sagged instantly, their hum swallowed by the damp foliage. Beetles the size of coins burst from hiding, drawn to the vibration, and peppered the silk until it collapsed. Nurai chirped an alarm. The forest took the sound and gave nothing back. Lyrae kept her eyes forward and her footfalls light, avoiding trumpet-shaped flowers that seemed to drink, shadow and puddles that reflected stars even in daylight. She stopped at a basin where the ground felt firmer and the air cooler, as if an unseen vent released calm into the space. 3 trees leaned toward one another, their mid-level branches touching to form a natural tripod. She scratched a small mark on each trunk with her knife. The academy manuals insisted shelters should rise on high, solid ground, but manuals assumed predators hunted by sight or smell. Lyrae suspected hearing mattered more here, and noise rose quickly through empty air. Still, the forked branches offered both lift and cover, and she trusted her sense more than any printed rule. Varsh, an amphibian with broad shoulders and shining gill slits, stumbled nearby, slapping wet leaves together with mucus glue. The leaves recoiled, curling away as if offended. He cursed, and the moss under him liquefied, swallowing him to the knees. Luminous forms wriggled toward the commotion. Varsh hacked himself free and limped off, tools clattering. Lyrae noted the lesson. The planet disliked haste. She uncoiled her cord and tied loops around her boots, then began to climb the nearest trunk. The bark was slick, but small nodes provided holds. Halfway up she paused. Faint blue veins flickered under the surface, carrying sap that glowed with every pulse of the forest. She whispered a thank you, then continued until she reached the young fork and swung on to a sturdy limb. From this perch she watched smoke plume where 2 pods had ignited on impact. and saw Yeren, a camouflage expert, sprint between roots before vanishing with a single, curt scream that ended too quickly. She worked. Thin branches grew like ribs from the trunk. She snapped them free, lashed them with doubled cord, and tested each knot with slow, steady pulls. Sweat gathered under her collar, but she moved gently enough that none fell to the ground below. Alarms howled in distant sectors where tech malfunctioned, then cut short as retrieval drones whisked failures away. A forest settled again, breathing its moist rhythm. She listened to the hush, fitting beam to beam, until the small platform held firm beneath her dot when her count of heartbeats reached what felt like an hour. She sat cross-legged, letting her pulse slow. Below, a shimmer of green light swept through. Undergrowth where another cadet triggered something unknown. Far off, a structure snapped shut like a jaw. Yet in her circle of leaning trees, the air remained steady, cool, almost welcoming. Lee rested her hands on the new floor, closed her eyes, and breathed with the planet quiet meeting quiet, while the breathing woods of Aurelis V decided whether to accept her for the night to come. The rain began as a mist and thickened into strands that looked almost solid, falling through the high canopy with a faint hiss. Each drop carried a faint glimmer of pale green, a reminder that nothing on Aurelis V was ordinary water. When the glowing droplets touched soil, they vanished instantly, absorbed by a skin of roots that covered the forest floor like braided muscle. Lee Wynn sat on her half-finished platform and watched those roots flex, remembering her grandmother's warning from long ago. If the ground moves like water, treat it like an animal. She eased herself lower, hooking one foot through a loop of cord so she could lean out and study the space directly beneath her tree. In the rain-washed twilight, the roots formed patterns, spirals, nets, coiled rings, then rearranged with slow patience. They were not random. They were mapping pressure, weight, maybe even emotion. She whispered thanks again, hoping the forest understood gratitude as well as caution. Far beyond her clearing, Noré still struggled with silk domes. The insectoid cadet had retreated beneath a broad leaf shaped like a tongue, convinced she could turn the leaf's veins into vibrating struts. Every test pulse she sent into the air was a cry of frustration that rolled through the forest like a sob. Lioré felt each vibration in the bark, and so did everything else. Soon a low growl answered, deeper than thunder. Nure's next pulse, cut short, replaced by the harsh buzz of wings as she fled. The growl faded, satisfied. Roots beneath Lyra's tree loosened, almost as if the ground sighed in relief. Ern. The snake-bodied strategist from Kellos had vanished earlier after, boasting of chemical mimicry. Now he reappeared at the edge of Lyra's sight, scales shifting through colors that tried to match bark and shadow. His technique worked for a moment, then faltered. The forest's living pigment changed faster than his implants could copy. A shimmer of orange bled through his camouflage, exposing him. Yeren sensed failure and attempted to correct the hue, flooding his skin with scent blockers as well. The ground reacted by bulging in uneven waves roots, lifting, twisting, knitting themselves around his tail. He slashed with a vibro blade, the hum rippling through wood like a shout. The nearest trees flared with bright bands of color, and a predator rustled forward in answer. Yeren froze. Lyra, 20 paces away and above, pressed a hand to her chest, so her heartbeat would not echo. Varsh, the amphibian cadet, had chosen a shallow ravine where water pooled in glistening sheets. There he tried to build a shelter by shaping clay. Walls with webbed hands, assuming moisture was his ally. But the ravine's water behaved like quicksilver, refusing shape, slipping away from every curve. As his frustration mounted, he slapped it, sending noisy ripples outward. The ripples carried light. Each crest sparked a tiny flash. Moments later, a school of transparent eels erupted, drawn to vibration. They whipped around Vash's legs, latching on with cold jaws. His howl rose, echoed, vanished. A retrieval drone descended in silence and lifted him skyward. Larray counted quietly 3 gone, 13 left. She returned to work. She trimmed smaller limbs, bending them into a lattice beneath her main platform, so the structure formed. Shallow bowl that cradled her weight. Every knot she tied in pairs, then smoothed loose fibers so nothing brushed noisily against bark. Each motion was deliberate. No wasted swings, no sharp jerks. While she worked, she spoke soft stories under her breath, old tales of rivers and black bears, of cedar bark that made rope, of storms survived in flimsy tents. The words steadied her hands, and more importantly, offered the forest a gentle cadence instead of metallic clangs. Below, the root webs appeared to relax. Tiny tendrils sprouted and followed her whispered rhythm, curling in what looked like lazy loops. Night threatened, but did not yet fall. On Aurelius V dusk came impulses, a dimming and brightening like a planet breathing through its clouds. With each dim phase, deeper sounds emerged, distant thumps, the crack of limbs breaking under unseen weight, a hiss like steam venting from beneath the roots. Larray paused to drink from a fold in a giant leaf that acted as a natural cup. The water tasted faintly sweet, laced with iron. She drank only a mouthful, then tipped the rest onto the bark, sharing it. A subtle warmth radiated upward as the tree accepted the gift. Raindrops striking its crown now slid down toward her instead of away, offering cleaner water the next time she was thirsty. Sudden movement caught her eye. 3 cadets she did not know by name hurried past below, carrying a gleaming ring of alloy. They planned, she guessed, to rig a communal shelter strength in numbers, at least in theory. Their footsteps drummed the warning through the root network. The ground between them bulged into ridges, diverting their path until they stumbled into a clearing littered with broken pods. There the alloy ring began to vibrate, absorbing energy from the soil. A flash of white burst skyward as the ring overloaded, and the cadets scattered, smoke trailing from scorched gloves. One bolted straight into a thicket that swallowed him, whole without noise. Another sprinted for higher ground and disappeared behind a curtain of black vines. The third dropped to his knees, panting, and raised an emergency beacon. Red light flickered 3 times before a retrieval beam speared. Down. The forest roots shrank back, almost smug, and quiet returned. The rain thinned at last. In its wake, the air gleamed with tiny motes that drifted like soft fireflies. Each mote settled on leaves and slid toward bark fissures, vanishing as though consumed. Larray felt a tingling at the soles of her feet. The tree was hungry now, pulling minerals from rain, harvesting light from motes, maybe even drawing knowledge from her own calm heartbeats. She let it. A bargain was forming. She would tread lightly, and the forest would remember her gentleness. A distant klaxon wailed and died. That meant 2 more failures somewhere on the planet's vast grid. Larray tightened final lashings. On her platform, tested the flex by pushing down with both palms, and nodded. It would hold through the first dark pulse at least. She eased onto her stomach and peered between branches. Roots below were still again, lying flat, but she could see faint scars where earlier struggles had scraped them raw. The forest kept its memories just beneath the skin, new lines crisscrossing old, like a silent diary of every footstep and cry. Larray wondered what mark she would leave. With careful motions, she took a small stone from her pocket, one she had carried from Earth, and set it into a natural groove in the branch, an offering, a reminder that she, too, had roots, even if they were light years away. The branch accepted the weight without protest. For a brief instant sap glimmered around the stone, and it hardened, sealing the gift in place. Lyrae allowed herself a thin smile. The roots below might remember pain and noise, but now they would also remember Trust Dot. As the final light faded from the sky, the forest of Aurelis V changed. It didn't go dark all at once. Instead, it dimmed in strange waves, like shadows rolling down from the canopy in slow, pulsing beats. One moment, Lyrae could see the branches above her shelter, soft and green. The next, they were gone, lost, in a dense curtain of black. The stars came out, but not like those back on Earth. These were too bright, too close, and they blinked. Some drifted sideways across the sky, revealing themselves as glowing creatures that mimicked constellations. Even the sky, it seemed, was a trick. Lyrae sat in her tree shelter, arms wrapped around her knees, listening. The branches beneath her shifted slightly in the breeze, or what she thought was breeze. It had no sound, no temperature, only movement. The forest breathed even at night, and that breath brought more than air. Below, the ground was still. No more wandering cadets, no footsteps, no distant shouts. The noises now came from the things that had waited until night. The forest belonged to them. A sudden crack echoed in the distance. Not a branch breaking underfoot, but something heavier like bone snapping. Then came a short, sharp cry, quickly. Cut off. Lyrae didn't move. She had learned not to react. Movement invited attention, and attention here meant danger. Somewhere to her left, something large brushed against a trunk. It didn't growl. It didn't hiss. It moved with confidence, as if it owned the path it walked. She could feel the vibration in the solace of her feet, even up here. It circled the base of her tree once, and was gone. She waited 5 minutes before she exhaled. Other cadets had not prepared for this. Many had built their shelters on the ground, assuming quick setups meant safety. But nothing on Aurelis V was quick or safe. One cadet, a tall woman from the ice planet Solara, had tried to form an igloo-like dome from giant leaves and hardened sap. She thought the structure would insulate her from the cold night. It did the opposite. The dome trapped her heat, and the scent drew in a swarm of translucent beetles. Their wings buzzed softly as they landed and crawled. She had screamed once, then hit the beacon. The retrieval drone arrived, but not fast enough. Lyrae saw the red light rise through the trees. One more gone. She crouched lower and pulled her thermal wrap around her shoulders. The chill had arrived suddenly, not as wind, but as a drop in pressure. The air felt heavier now, wet and thick. Her breath fogged in front of her, even though the temperature wasn't freezing. She rubbed her arms, then reached into her pouch and pulled out a small bowl of coiled bark. Inside, she placed the last of her dried moss and a few flakes of sap she had collected earlier. She struck 2 small stones together. The sparks were weak, but enough. The moss caught. A tiny orange glow bloomed and warmed her fingers. She placed the bowl inside a leaf dome she had shaped earlier. The light was now shielded and barely visible outside, but it gave her a small comfort. All around, the night deepened. The noises became stranger. Whispers that had no voice moved through the trees. She tried to ignore them, but once she heard her own name. It wasn't spoken. Not really. It was more like a breath in the back of her mind, a thought that didn't belong to her. She closed her eyes and reminded herself that the forest could echo memories, even fears. It used what it found inside. If you gave it fear, it gave it back to you. A short while later, another cadet's structure failed. A glowing vine had slithered up the side of his woven shelter and begun to tighten. He had ignored it at first, thinking it was harmless. Then it squeezed, pulling his whole shelter inward like a trap closing on its prey. Lyrae heard the panic in his voice. He shouted for help, cursed, begged. Then the retrieval drone's soft hum filled the air. It always came without urgency, without emotion. The cadet disappeared, the forest quiet again. She shifted her weight. Carefully, testing the strength of her platform. It held. Her leaf roof was tied down well, and her supplies were secured. She had a little water, a little food, and enough warmth to last until morning, if morning ever came. On Aurelius V, even. Time felt uncertain. The night didn't just stretch on. It pressed down on her, thick like syrup. Each second felt slower than the one before. Below her, something moved. It was slow, deliberate. She could hear its breathing steady and shallow, like it didn't need much air. Its steps were heavy but careful, never cracking a single twig. Then it stopped. She didn't dare look. She stayed still, even held her breath. The creature remained there for several minutes. She could feel its presence in her bones, though she never saw it. Then it walked away, the roots absorbing the sound of its steps. She waited long after it had gone, before moving again. The small fire had burned down to embers. She tucked it out, packed the bark bowl, and lay back on the platform. Overhead, the fake stars moved again. A group of floating lights passed above her like a flock, their glow too smooth, their path too straight. She ignored them. Everything here was pretending to be something else. She allowed her mind to rest, but didn't close her eyes. There was no sleep in this place, only survival. She thought of her grandmother's voice, low and steady, telling stories by firelight. You can survive the dark, she had once said, but only if you stop pretending it isn't there. Lyrae smiled faintly. She understood now. The dark didn't want to be fought. It wanted to be respected. The night was far from over. But Lyrae was still there, quiet, unseen, unmoved. The second wave of night fell harder than the first. It came without warning. One moment there was a soft glow above the treetops, and the next, darkness folded over everything like a thick, wet cloth. The air changed with it. What had been cool and damp now became heavy and sharp, filled with a metallic scent that made Lyrae's tongue feel dry. She didn't move. Wrapped in her leaf cloak, she stayed flat on the floor of her shelter, eyes open, listening to the silence that wasn't truly silent. The forest had many voices. Some were too quiet to hear. Others were inside her head. Aurelius V did not sleep. It simply watched. Below her, the roots had shifted again. They pulsed now, ever so slightly, in uneven rhythms, as though reacting to something unseen. Lyrae pressed her fingers against the bark beneath her and felt a new kind of tension. It wasn't fear. It was attention. The forest was focused. Something was coming. From a distant section of the grid, a voice rose in a full scream. It wasn't just a sound, it was emotion, torn raw and thrown into the air. Lyrae didn't recognize the voice, but she recognized the pattern. It was the sound of a cadet who had run out of hope. The cry ended fast, cut off by a sharp snap, followed by silence. A few moments later, a soft white light blinked through the trees, the quiet arrival of a retrieval drone. The forest absorbed the event like a stone sinking in water. No ripples, no echo, just stillness. Lyrae rolled onto her side and checked the edges of her shelter. Everything was intact. Her bindings held. The leaf canopy above her was strong enough to stop light rain and soft enough to muffle her scent. She had wrapped her feet in fabric to silence every shift in movement. Her supplies, tucked into the fork of the branches, remained untouched. Her body was tired but calm. She wasn't hungry, only alert. Somewhere nearby, a low clicking noise started. It sounded mechanical at first, like a broken machine. But as it continued, it took on a rhythm 3 short, 2 long, and a pause. Then again, A signal, perhaps, or a call. She didn't answer. She didn't even blink. The clicking faded, replaced by a shuffling sound, as maybe someone moved through the underbrush and disappeared into the dark. High above the forest floor, the glowing insects returned. They floated through the branches like drifting lanterns, their warm orange light gently pulsing. One landed on Lyray's arm, then hovered again. She didn't flinch. The insect circled her once, then moved on. It wasn't interested. She had no scent of fear. The creatures, like the forest, responded to what was felt, not just what was done not far off. A cadet named Fen had built a platform similar to Lyray's. He was a tall, quiet one from the sand world of Terran. He had constructed his shelter quickly, using a system of magnetic pulleys and light fibers, proud of its balance and elegance. But he hadn't checked the trees he used. They weren't stable. One was hollow inside. During the night, something broke through. His shelter tilted, slid, and then vanished. The next morning, only splinters and broken cords remained. The forest left no trace. Lyray's thoughts drifted to the Academy's first lesson, the one. The instructors repeated before every test. Adapt or be removed. Most cadets took that to mean adjusting tactics or fixing failures quickly. But Lyray had come to believe the message was deeper. Adapting wasn't about reacting fast. It was about understanding slowly. It was about listening first. Hours passed. Maybe. It was hard to tell. Time moved differently here, stretched and soft like the moss beneath her boots. Then, without sound, something rose into view beside her shelter. A shape. It didn't climb. It simply appeared. Tall, with limbs that bent the wrong way and skin that shimmered like moving ink. It had no face, just a smooth, rounded head and 6 eyes that opened one by one. They glowed, not brightly, but with steady light. Lyray didn't move. Her breath slowed. Her heart kept steady. The creature hovered for several seconds, then leaned closer. It smelled the air, blinked twice, and paused. Lyray's body remained still, her mind sharp. She had masked her scent. Her warmth was hidden. Her fire was out. She had not challenged the forest. She had blended with it. The creature tilted its head and turned and disappeared down the trunk as silently as it had come. Lyray exhaled slowly. Not relief, just release. She had been right. Presence, not performance, was what mattered here. The forest didn't respond to those who tried to fight it. It accepted those who respected it. As the sky above began to shift again, light returning in slow streaks of pale green, Lyray finally moved. She stood carefully, testing each part of her shelter. Everything held. Her leaf roof sagged a little, but remained intact. Her bark ropes were still tight. She stretched her arms, rolled her shoulders, and looked out across the treetops. In the distance, she saw fewer signal lights now, fewer shelters, fewer survivors. When the instructors landed, hours later, they found her already waiting, perched calmly on her platform, her shelter complete, her supplies untouched. She didn't wave or call out. She just sat, still and quiet, as the retrieval drone drifted toward her. One of the instructors stepped forward, scanning for any tech she may have hidden. There was none. Just a girl from Earth, with a blade, a belt of cord, and a memory of trees older than time. She had passed the test, not because she was the strongest, or the fastest, or the smartest, but because she had listened. She had heard the forest, and the forest had remembered her.